Well, my name is Dr. Paul-ReneTamburro. I'm an anthropologist and also an Abenaki person who is a Algonquin linguist. I'm a civil worker. I've done many things over the years in what we call First Nation country. I'm both a Canadian and a U.S. citizen and an Abenaki citizen. So basically, I guess I have 3 citizenships, which may be unfamiliar to many people in Dakana, which is a word for our land here. Aki meaning earth, and in Dakana is a possessive that means it's our land. So we still remember that we're from here. Many of us, including myself, have ancestry from Europe also, or from Africa or Asia, but some of us who actually consider ourselves citizens of a nation, through enrollment in that nation, it's basically a citizenship, consider ourselves a descendant of this place. We don't, when we're thinking about the past, for example, maybe we're not thinking about, well, what ancestors were doing around the Knights of the Round Table, or we're not thinking about kings and princesses in Europe, or we're not thinking about Egypt and the Mediterranean. Although many of us have been through the regular school system, that's all I learned about. And to get a doctorate in anthropology, I had to study mostly perspectives of old world cultures, as they're called. And then they have that word, the new world, for our world, but this is our old world. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a different worldview. There's a different centricity. My centricity, Island and Dakana, our land here. So I focus on the arts and the materials, the ways of doing things from this land. And we had our own stories about creation, for example, which have to do with different relationships we had with the world, such as animals. In some cases the spider, some cases the turtle, and the different animals that helped us live on this earth. And people have tried to distort those stories because they are trying to make them look more like European stories. Europe talks about dragons. We talk about thunders, the thunderbirds, the thunder beings. We have the underwater serpents, but we also have the underwater panthers as part of our culture. We also have the turtles that form the islands, and some people, when you think of Loch Ness monsters as serpents, we sometimes realize it's a giant turtle coming up with a hump on the back. We have different stories about that. We have stories about many things, but they're told in other languages. We have our own little people, stories. But we're still alive today, and what has happened for the past couple of hundred years has been a destruction of our languages and our stories. So most of us are just like your neighbors today of any culture, except that in some cases many of us are more ashamed of who we are, because we were specifically told to be ashamed because it was primitive or different or whatever. And the reason for that was that if you had a powerful people here, they're the only ones that can challenge the possession of foreigners, such as Germans and English and French and Irish and Scottish and all of the foreigners that came here that now call themselves and have appropriated the name American. If you go back 200 to 300 years ago, American always meant a Native American person, First Nation Canadian, whatever. It didn't mean somebody who was English. I mean, the people in the Revolutionary War on both sides of the United States were, what is now the United States, were Englishmen and Scottish and Frenchmen. They were not Americans. The Americans were the Lenape, which are now called the Delaware, after a British guy who had the name Delaware. Or the Mohawk, the Haudenosaunee, the people of Longhouse, the Wabanaki people. We were the Americans. Today, in the United States, I teach in both United States and Canada at the university level, basically in health sciences. And I have actually, when I come to the United States and lecture and then apply for a job, at a job interview recently, I just got, "Can't you do anything but Indians?" and was basically told during the interview, I then made a comment about I love Hindi food and South Asian food, but yes, we have Aboriginal or First Nation people here, and we prefer the term Indigenous mostly now. But obviously I wasn't going to get the job. And he said, all your publications are on Indians. I said, well, in Canada, healthcare professionals are required to know how to work with First Nation communities. In the United States, as a minority group, we've been disappeared. I mean, I'm okay with Hillary Clinton, for example, in your politics. But she was cheering on all the minorities the other day, you know, African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, gay lesbian American, but she didn't, Native American, didn't get mentioned. I mean, we have been disappeared. We have over 560 federally recognized sovereign nations in the United States, but I can't get a school of social work, which I've been chair of in both Canada and the US at different times, to have that as part of their curriculum, to talk about the fact that when you remove children, you have to negotiate with one of the 570 sovereign nations if the child might be enrollable. I feel bad for Americans. They know nothing. They're ignorant about Native peoples. I've been questioning people in the high schools, you know, pretty much. I live in Indiana now. I've lived in New Hampshire. I've lived in Washington, Oregon, Vermont. I lived in Connecticut. I've lived in a number of different places. There used to be more in New York. There used to be more in the curriculum. But what I've been reminded is that, oh, if you're in the healthcare field today, or and I do also have a doctorate in medical anthropology, says if you are doing that today in today's world, the interest is in Asia or in the Middle East. And there's no interest in First Nations people anymore, and it's considered irrelevant. And so unless you want to apply to a history department, I'm told I can apply to a history department to get a job in the academy if I want to have my research in the United States be on First Nations, Aboriginal, or Indigenous peoples. If I'm in Canada, that is changing somewhat, but there's still somewhat that attitude. I had a person that I worked with for a while who is a Métis author, last name Dickerson, and she wanted to do her doctorate on the history of and she was a historian, and she wanted to do her doctorate on the First Nations of Canada. And she was told by her doctoral committee at McGill that there wasn't enough information or enough there for the First Nations to do a whole dissertation. So anyway, she got mad and finally got it approved, and she threw everything but the kitchen sink in. But I used her book as a textbook it was just the tip of the iceberg, but talked about so many different nations, so many different languages, so much different history that pertained to what we are doing in the present. If you've ever been to Europe, if you've ever been to Asia, do you consider people who say that they've been somewhere for 700 years or 800 years in a house, and therefore they have a claim to that place, as important? Think of Germans, think of Polish, think of Italians. Okay, well, how come you don't pick on them? We try to say 150 years ago we did something, and they say, get over it. Okay, my grandmother remembers when there were many people speaking our language. There's just about nobody speaking our language anymore. It's been, you know, the term genocide only came out after World War II. But look at the 7 different definitions of genocide, including the removal of children from their families intentionally to destroy it. Think of the idea of exercising a people from history, so that the people are no longer taught their history in the schools or anything. These are all among the 7 different items that constitute not just ethnocide, but also genocide, the disappearance of a people. And yes, the physical genocide should be obvious. There were many, many, many thousands of people in New England, millions of people across the Americas, and the word genocide hadn't been coined yet. But what we've been talking about a lot in both the United States and Canada is the proclamations that were made even in the 1500s, you know, by the 2 different popes, you know, basically saying to subjugate any barbarian nations. And that has been used in arguments right up to a few years ago in both Canada and in the United States, for the excuse to take away Indigenous land or ignore Indigenous land, or to force a European-styled culture, such as the version of Christianity that's used in Europe at this time. You can't be a traditional person in most of our reservations and reserves anymore without being criticized by our own people because of what has happened. So, what I am pleading for any of you that might have any connection to the academy or any type of educational programs, and think for a minute, for high school and such, Texas, fundamentalists have taken over what's in the textbooks. So basically, native peoples and a genocide of our people and the removal of our people's cultures intentionally that's been done for so many years has been removed from those textbooks. So there's nothing there. So your high school students going into colleges know nothing, and they learn even less in the university setting. So we have been effectively, in a genocidal way, continue to be disappeared. My plea is find ways to bring us back in. In Vermont, for example, people need to know about the Abenaki peoples. Need to know, and I say peoples, there's more than one Abenaki group. There's so much to it, whether linguistics programs need to cover it. Can you imagine having a language program in France or Germany that didn't have stuff on German and French? I mean, how can you be in the land of the Abenaki and not have something on Abenaki? You go over to New York, you have to have something on the Haudenosaunee, the different Iroquois languages. You go to Connecticut, the Mohegan, the Pequot languages. You go to South Dakota, Lakota languages, or Turtle Mountain, North Dakota, you need to have something on the Michif and the Ojibwe Cree. You know, if you go to California, you've got something like I think 130 potential languages there. So, in France, you need to know what Basque is also, and in Spain, you need to know what Catalan and Spanish is. People know what multilingualism is in Europe. I have had Native American people say they wanted to learn another language that was a minority language, and they wouldn't learn their own. They would go to Ireland to study Gaelic because they thought that they had been taught in school and on TV and everything that castles are cool and running around in a dress or a skirt as a kilt or something like that. Well, that's cool. You can dress that way, or you can have a bear fur hat with a little knife on your side and blow into the guts of some animal for a bagpipe, and that's not primitive because that's from the British Isles. However, if we wear anything such as feathers or anything that's traditional to our culture, that's the only thing that sticks in people's minds. We were also wonderful metalsmiths. We went back, how many people that, even that I'm addressing right now that might be listening to this, know about 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, the Hopewell, and then after that the Mississippian mound builder cultures that were master workers in copper. And how about the goldsmiths and the platinum workers of Colombia and such. The Spaniards, when they encountered platinum being worked in Colombia by the indigenous people there, were told by the alchemists that it was unripe gold, and so they dumped it into the river to ripen the gold. People are still looking for all that platinum jewelry that was dumped. I mean, and my plea is basically to have more people get interested in traditional work of indigenous people and ask the question, where did this come from? And also, especially if you're from New England, and I'm being filmed right now in Vermont, so especially here in New England, as I go across this area, I understand the place names. I mean, they've been butchered through the English language in many cases, but they mean something. I mean, and all the places here had different stories that went with them. And the Europeans that came here were mostly just interested in taking the land, not learning about the stories. Well, to get this interest rebuilt, there has to be some reality given to it in the academic institutions. Now, let's see, I did a minor in higher education administration at Indiana University. And those of you that have studied higher education administration, fine, but most university professors have not. And I need to point out that your basic 101 class in higher ed administration is that it's all copied after the monastic system of Europe, where basically you are either going to get your higher education by being a priest or minister of the church, or you were going to be a doctor or some form of artist. You didn't have too many choices. Now we've got historians, anthropologists, physicists, mathematicians, all specializing in different areas. What I'm saying is all of those fields can incorporate indigenous knowledge. Certainly as a medical anthropologist, I can tell you that all the medicines that we're using today in the medical field have some kind of correlate from, you can find some plant or something that had as its base. And we're losing plants and, in the environment. I mean, I can go on, and a little bit of fear from my other field of developmental disabilities and such that I'm going to be labeled attention deficit here. I don't want to get too tangential, but what I'm trying to say is all of the fields that are in the academy can incorporate some form of indigenous knowledge and use examples from different indigenous cultures. Now, by indigenous, because I'm sitting in Vermont, I'm referring specifically to North America and maybe Mesoamerica and South America also, but what has been referred to by Europeans and therefore left out as the New World. Because we're new, the idea is it's new for you to abuse and use. On the other hand, there are thousands of years of culture here, which is more and more. All you got to do is an aerial survey of Ohio, an aerial survey of Mesoamerica, an aerial survey of the Andes, or an aerial survey of the Amazon, to see that there were many civilizations that had quite a bit of architecture and civil engineering and other things going on prior to European contact. And if I went back in time 40 to 50 years, there were people in the Smithsonian who were the gatekeepers of, for instance, anthropology, that to talk like I'm talking now would make it clear that you'd never get a job in the academy, especially as an anthropologist, because even then we had there was a stranglehold on our whole academic profession, that there was nothing here in the Americas before about 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, and that the idea of the progression of civilization still held. You need to know that this is no longer the field of knowledge. We understand now, the cutting edge is that there were a lot of knowledges, and there's still knowledge there available, but a lot of it's tied up in languages that are quickly disappearing. What I am suggesting is that you at least mention for one day out of your whole semester in your various courses enough about indigenous peoples that people can know we exist and know that it is an option, and then maybe actually develop a department that, and usually it's interdisciplinary, but not to have it be just a minority studies type of departmental degree that ends up not getting you a job, but have it as a viable certificate or minor within especially the health fields such as medical, physicians programs, programs for nursing, programs for social work, programs for, anything there in mathematics. Start incorporating concepts from that we're coming up with more and more on indigenous architecture, the geometry there, we still have, you can still go to any archaeological club and find what are obviously plumb bobs for measuring, roads and buildings are still being called bolos, that somebody would throw to attack a bird. When it's basically everything that we had has been reframed as something a primitive person would do out on the hunt, due to the imagination and the fantasies of the conqueror, not having anything to do with the realities that any mathematician or civil engineering person could figure out by spending some time in the, among the mound builder culture, as they call it. Of course, and here we have a huge amount of technology being developed for recording, for online programs, for distance education, and we can't seem to find ways to end the genocide and the ethnocide. We can for, if you want to study Gaelic or, Welsh or, certain European endangered languages, well, how many of you can even name the languages from the area within 100 miles of where you live? So there you go. I'm passionate about language, but I do lots of silver because I can't seem to find a job lately. As long as I've been department chair, I have been able to get jobs, but once I started switching to wanting to primarily talk about indigenous issues, especially after working in the United States, as long as I don't talk about indigenous stuff, I'm okay. Yes, maybe we want the land back, but we know we're not going to get it back, so get over it. But you can at least give us the respect of having our cultures and stuff kept alive. I guess I should say Tahoe. I noticed some of the elders used to say Tahoe when they were done speaking.